Welcome into the 49er Access podcast. My name is Sterling Bennett. We are brought to you by SeatGeek. Use our promo code 49ers Access for $20 off your first purchase. And by the time you are listening or watching to this, I will hopefully be an engaged man if everything goes as planned. So I guess congratulations to myself and my wonderful, hopeful, eventual fiance. We're having a good time. We're now engaged, hopefully. And again, but let's dive into what actually matters here. The 49ers over my eventual fiance and engagement. Let's talk about the San Francisco 49ers. And let's talk about a conversation that's actually been kind of bothering me because a lot of times when a certain player, tends to either be close to an extension or be close to hitting free agency, this conversation of should you trade them always seems to kind of rear its ugly head. And you can debate as to keep this guy and trade that guy and keep this guy and trade the other guy. And this conversation has kind of come up again, and it is between Deebo Samuel and Brandon Aiyuk. And I've seen many fans out there discuss, trade Brandon Aiyuk, get what you can for him now, and trade Deebo Samuel. And we'll dive into a little more into how that can happen and if it actually can or can't happen. But this conversation really has stemmed from Brandon Aiyuk is expecting to get a contract extension next offseason, a whole year to go. So many things can happen, but he's expecting a big money contract extension. And with Deebo Samuel coming off of a down year in 2022 and the unknown of what could happen in 2023, fans have been debating what should the San Francisco 49ers do with their star receivers. Now, let's get one thing clear first. We have no idea who they'll restructure. That's become kind of a commodity in the offseason. Christian McCaffrey got it this past year. Fred Warner and George Kittle got it 2 years ago. Like, they are going to restructure somebody. And if things stay the way they are now, they could carry over around $9 million in cap space, which could affect how they spend and who they spend it on. But at this very moment, the Niners, at least the conversation is, the Niners are going to have to decide between Brandon Aiyuk or Deebo Samuel. And I think to dive into the conversation, to dive into the debate here, I think the easiest way to break down both of these players is discuss who they were the last couple seasons, what are their highs, what are their lows, but also what is the outlook in 2024, because that is really the season we're looking at here. And the broader conversation is, look, this is a huge year for both players. Brandon Aiyuk wants to get paid. He has to come out and do what he did last year again, and arguably even more if he wants that big payday. On the flip side, Deebo Samuel, coming off the down year in 2022, he has to kind of find who he was in 2021 all over again and be that player to have fans say, you deserve to stay, or, not be a victim of getting cut, which I don't think is going to happen by any chance, but more so of, are you the player we paid you to be? Is that the Deebo Samuel we're going to get, or are we going to get 2022 Deebo Samuel, which is a fine Deebo Samuel. I like that Deebo Samuel, but I prefer, as most do, the 2021 All-Pro, one of the best, if not the best season ever by a San Francisco 49ers receiver, Deebo Samuel. But again, what are these players going to be? And look, there's a ton of pressure on both of these guys. I think, a large part of the conversation is Deebo Samuel has to watch out. He better watch out for Brandon Aiyuk. He's coming for his job. He's gunning for that number one receiver title. And with that title comes that gigantic paycheck. Can San Francisco afford to pay both of them? And I think the answer is yes, but also no. And let's dive into that right now. Let's figure out together who the best option to keep and maybe who even the best option to cut is for the San Francisco 49ers come 2024, a whole year that actually isn't even happened yet because we haven't even witnessed the entirety of 2023. But let's go into the future, get into your DeLorean with me, be my Doc to my Marty, and let's drive off, hit the megawatts, hit the megahertz, and let's look into the future for 1 second here. And let's discuss 2024. In 2024, Brandon Aiyuk will be 26 years old. Again, coming off a season in 2022 where he led this team in targets, had over 115, I believe, led the team in receptions, had 78, had his first 1,000-yard receiving season, finished second on the team in receiving touchdowns with 8, and in 2024, going to be playing on his fifth-year option of $14.1 million. That is the circumstance of or for Brandon Aiyuk that we know of heading into the 2024 season. On the inverse, you have Deebo Samuel. In 2024, Deebo Samuel will be going into his age 28 season, coming off a down year where he was second on the team in targets, third in receptions with 56, third on the team in receiving yards with 632, and also third with 5 total touchdowns. But look, it's tough because when you look at Deebo Samuel and the way he plays and the aggression, the physicality, we talked earlier this week that is a reason why, and that does define part of this Niners defense. This does really, kind of the way Deebo Samuel plays is the offensive style Kyle Shanahan wants to play. Smash mouth football in your face, run the ball 45 times, beat you in every way possible. There's a reason why he has guys like Christian McCaffrey and Kyle Juszczyk and Deebo Samuel, versatile players that can do so many different things. George Kittle. Even Brandon Aiyuk fits that mold, but not as much as Deebo Samuel, being a running and receiving threat that Deebo has shown to be since 2021 and even part of 2019. But he does miss many, many games. Got hurt a little bit in 2020, got hurt again in 2021, albeit very small because he wasn't showed to be almost the entirety of the offense that year. But in 2022, he missed a handful of games, only played 13 games out of the 17. He kind of just missed a catastrophic season-ending injury against the Buccaneers. Thank the good Lord that didn't happen. He even thought that was going to happen when he went down, but missed an injury there because of the way he likes to play. Your body breaks down on you. So with San Francisco investing so much money into him, the question is, okay, which Deebo Samuel are you going to get? Are you going to get 2021 All-Pro, over 2,000 yards, 16 touchdowns, that single-handedly led the offense, Deebo Samuel? Or are you going to get 56 receptions, 630 yards, 5 touchdowns, Deebo Samuel? There's pressure on both sides here. I think both players put a ton of pressure on themselves. Brandon Aiyuk said, I'm going to take off. Deebo Samuel said, I was awful last year. Both these guys have things to prove, but this debate being who should the San Francisco 49ers keep, I don't really think is centered in the right mindset, because I don't really think San Francisco has to choose. There is this thing that isn't common, but many fans should think about this. Let 2023, 2024 season play out. Knock on wood, things happen. Injuries happen. Hope they don't, but they do. Maybe Aiyuk doesn't play as well. Maybe Deebo comes back to who he is and you feel more justified or comfortable paying him that money, which, let's be honest here, it isn't even our money. It's their money, so do what you want with it. But being a fan of the team, being someone who covers the team, you want them to, use their money wisely. And as of this moment, this team has paid for 2022 Deebo Samuel, not 2021 Deebo Samuel. And you can argue that maybe the way Deebo plays, he's going to, descend into a place where he is 2022 and potentially worse Deebo Samuel because of the physicality and the injuries and the usage. whereas Brandon Aiyuk might be ascending into a star number one receiver role, which I think he is. I think Brandon Aiyuk looks like a star. He plays like a star. He is this team's best receiver. Again, he's been slicing and dicing in camp and OTAs. Like, he looks like the best receiver on this team. And we haven't seen Deebo Samuel yet, and we'll see him come training camp. But from what Brandon Aiyuk has shown, he looks like a star. He showed last year what he can do. He's an amazing route runner. He can create so much separation in very short windows that benefits this offense a lot. So it's kind of a pick your poison. Do you want Deebo Samuel on the field because you paid him so much, or would you be open to, or at least some fans have shown to be open to, the discussion of moving on from Deebo Samuel? I do think part of that conversation does stem from the idea that Christian McCaffrey has taken some of the thunder from Deebo Samuel, but I like to have some thunder and lightning, so why not have Deebo and Christian McCaffrey be thunder and lightning for you? But I understand that conversation. We dove into it when I talked about my four most important players on the San Francisco 49ers, and there's a reason why I left Deebo Samuel off that list, was because of Christian McCaffrey, because of what he means to the offense. And he has taken some of the snaps, the targets, the yards, the touchdowns away from Deebo Samuel. And I think many fans, even including myself to a certain point, say Christian McCaffrey is a more dynamic player. They'll be the exact same age next season in 2024. They're the exact same age right now. Now, you can argue that one or the other has more tread on the tires, but I don't think that matters with McCaffrey or Deebo. I think McCaffrey takes care of his body a lot more than Deebo does. Deebo's already admitted that he kind of let himself slip in 2022 when he wanted the big contract. And he even said himself, like, I was distracted. I messed up. I put things on tape I never want to see again. And when you have to meet with Kyle Shanahan and you go over tape and it's like you have your head down and saying, man, like, I messed up. Like, I did not put my best foot forward. And I think Deebo Samuel sees that. And so when you have a motivated Deebo Samuel, you don't know what you're going to get in 2023. It's hard to kind of project or predict what you should do in 2024 because there's so many options. I think with Brandon Aiyuk, you kind of find yourself in a position where the Niners are kind of found themselves with a lot of their players, a lot of their first round picks, mind you, Eric Armstead, Deebo Samuel, who's a second round pick, but same situation of, towards the end of your contract, you have an amazing season and you find yourself saying, pay me, I want my money. And it's well deserved. It really is. But that makes the team question, is this a 1 year wonder or is this who you are going to be as a player? It worked with Eric Armstead. Is it going to work with Brandon Aiyuk? We don't know. It worked with McGlinchey, but when you have guys like Solomon Thomas and, you have guys like Javon Kinlaw who aren't getting their options picked up, you do have to ask yourself, is there a chance we get burned here? And San Francisco has made it a point to pay the players they value. Jimmy Garoppolo, they paid him. They valued him, obviously moved on, but they did pay him. They weren't afraid to trade for and eventually have to pay Christian McCaffrey. They paid Deebo Samuel. They paid George Kittle and Fred Warner. They went and bought Mooney Charvarius Ward as a free agent. They are going to pay Nick Bosa, hopefully soon. They have paid Javon Hargrave and Eric Armstead. Like, they have made it a point to pay people they value. But the question is, have they paid too many people where they aren't even going to have the opportunity to pay Brandon Aiyuk, which I think is the bigger conversation. I don't think it's a conversation of, do they want to? Of course they do. Yes, they want to pay Brandon Aiyuk. Like, duh, I want to pay him right now. But they have to look themselves in the mirror and say, can we financially make this investment in him? And unfortunately, San Francisco finds themselves in a position where they already have more money allotted to next year's or 2024's salary cap than allowed. Like they're already over next year's salary cap. So that could be as simple as restructuring somebody or a trade we don't see or how they want to wiggle around certain things. But at this very moment, San Francisco is in kind of a save as much as you can now mode because we've talked about trying to sign an edge rusher and how they have enough money. But in credit to David Lombardi and Matt Barrows, I was listening to them talk about it, and they said that no, like this team feels like they're ready to go into the year with Drake Jackson and Beal and Farrell and Hargrave and Bosa and guys like that to kind of figure out this pass rushing group. But on top of that, they mentioned that this team, their $9 million they're saving, they want to carry that over into next year. And when you pay Nick Bosa, that should go up a little bit, maybe around 12 to $11 million, maybe even higher, depending on how they structure that. But they want to save money. And I think the reason they want to save money is not only to eventually pay certain players, but when they have to restructure guys, they want to be able to keep star players. They want to be able to, hey, like we traded up for Brandon Aiyuk. We got back into the first round for him. He's shown he can play very well. Let's keep him. Let's, like, it's always good to keep players you draft because it shows how well you did. This isn't a Reuben Foster where he was just a bad person kind of thing, or a Javon Kinlaw who can't stay healthy kind of thing. This is a player who has been on the field, been a good person, and been successful in multiple facets of the game for you. You want to keep those players. And so for San Francisco, I think they find themselves in a position saying, we want to do this. We don't know if we can, but we are going to do what we can to at least hopefully keep that door open as long as possible. Now, you can structure contracts in so many different ways. And I think statistically, I think you would have to lean towards Deebo Samuel's prior success as to that's the guy we would keep. But again, do you look yourself in the mirror as a fan, as the team, as myself, and say, I'd rather have Deebo Samuel off the team and have Christian McCaffrey and Brandon Aiyuk be on the offense? Like who's more replaceable though? That's also a big question. Can you replace Deebo Samuel? Some might say you kind of already have, or at least a part of, in Christian McCaffrey. Some might say you can replace Brandon Aiyuk a lot easier. He's a route running, quick feet, sure-handed receiver that you can find guys like that, albeit not as good immediately. Let's be honest here. Any receiver that you replace Brandon Aiyuk with, if you do trade him, that guy kind of becomes, a 1 year in the doghouse guarantee player, like Danny Gray, like Pettis, even like Brandon Aiyuk himself. It took him, 3 years to find himself in the NFL. And if you're San Francisco, and I hate to say this, but if you're San Francisco and you have a star player like Brandon Aiyuk, and let's say you feel the need, or let's say they can't pay him at all. We don't have enough money. We don't have enough funds, even after restructuring players, to pay you. We have to trade him. One, that lowers his value, but two, you are trading away a star player and telling a young player you try to replace him with the weight of the world's on your shoulders to be Brandon Aiyuk, if not better. And unfortunately, San Francisco has a tendency of doing so. Javon Kinlaw, DeForest Buckner being the prime example. But even then, if you want to dive into maybe, a more concentrated area, Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo. I know Jimmy G wasn't a star. I know he wasn't, what we hoped he might be here in San Francisco, but he was ultra successful, loved in the locker room and by the fan base, or at least a larger portion of the fan base. And it ended poorly for him, being losing in a playoff game and getting hurt again in 2022. But that is another position where San Francisco said, we're going to draft a younger replacement in hopes he can be better than you, while openly telling the entire world we are going to move off of you. It's nothing new for San Francisco. But in a situation like that, you are setting, in a sense, a young player up for failure. Um, Lance has a great team around him, and it's not really his fault he's been hurt or the team's as well, but that's life. You can argue living up to Jimmy Garoppolo, who I get wasn't amazing, but was good enough for a lot of people. And many fans do not like Trey Lance for dumb reasons, but many because of the moving up of Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, had Brock Purdy not come in and saved the season, you would have people clamoring for Jimmy Garoppolo to stay. You just would. And that's bad for Trey Lance. Now, that didn't happen, but that would have happened. Mark my words, that would have happened. Um, and for Javon Kinlaw, people do not like Javon Kinlaw. Again, for dumb reasons, but I understand you're not healthy. You have shown no value to this team, and we used a first round pick on you that we got for a phenomenal player in DeForest Buckner, who we just basically brought back in with Javon Hargrave. So there is that added pressure onto a young player if San Francisco goes down the trading Brandon Aiyuk route. But the way I see this is there is no way, none, zip, nada, zilch, settle, whatever word or phrase or number you want to put that equals the numerical value of 0.00000. There is 0% chance that the San Francisco 49ers are going to move off of Deebo Samuel in 2024. They literally can't. They can't. Deebo Samuel is going to make $20.9 million in base salary 2024, carry a $28 million cap hit, and a $26 million dead cap hit. They can save $2 million by cutting him and $2 million by trading him. That's not worth it. They're not going to do that. They're going to say you have more value to be on this team right now than trading you away. Like, the Niners after 2021 said you have more value being on this team, playing on a max contract than you do elsewhere with Deebo Samuel. They had offers that weren't great by any means, but they could have traded him and chose not to. They can trade him for a lot less now, but the option there is we can only save $2 million. That's not worth it. You can do very little with $2 million in the NFL, especially when it comes to picking Deebo or Brandon Aiyuk. Like, that's not enough to make anyone sway or change their mind. Like, Brandon Ayuk's not going to say, yeah, I'll play for $16 million. Like, I think what is more likely here, and I do think that the Niners truly have four legit options here when it comes to the future of Brandon Aiyuk and Deebo Samuel in 2024. And it doesn't come down to one or the other or both or not. It comes down to making the smartest and the simplest and the most logical conclusion, the most logical answer here. Decision making is these four things. The first one is extend Brandon Aiyuk, which right now seems impossible due to money allocations. That's one option. Right now, that is physically and financially impossible. You cannot do that right now. The other thing is, like we discussed, you can trade a first round pick or trade Brandon Aiyuk for a first round pick and try to replace him. That to me seems of one of the options when it comes to moving off of Brandon Aiyuk. That makes the most sense if that is the route they choose to go down. I think they've done it so many times. Kinlaw, Lance, even Hufanga, granted, wasn't traded for, but was drafted as a replacement, which isn't groundbreaking, but a young player brought in to replace a veteran player. Teams do it all the time. San Francisco has done it in the first round, trading up all the time, even trading away the player they're going to replace for a first round pick to replace him with a player. Like, they do it a lot. And if they do it again, it wouldn't shock me, even if they didn't want to. That is an option they've done a handful of times, and I can easily see them doing it again. The other thing is they can trade somebody else and free up cap room. They could theoretically trade Eric Armstead after this year. He'd be an aging defensive lineman, and they can trade him and save $11 million. Now, is that enough to bring in guys, pay your draft class, and extend Brandon Aiyuk? I don't know. That's up to what San Francisco wants to do. Don't forget, they have their first round pick finally back this year. So that could factor into what they want to do. Maybe if it comes to trading Brandon Aiyuk in 2024, maybe it comes down to, okay, now we have 2 first round draft picks. Let's trade up even higher and get into the top 5 or top 10. Like, there are options there because let's be honest here, we have no idea what's going to happen. So this team, the entire, like, we cannot be alive tomorrow, like for Kyle Shanahan. So, like, we have no idea what the future holds, but let's say this team is still really good. They're still, a top 5 team in football with this roster and having plenty of success still. Like, that pick is likely at least going to be, 24 and up, right? Well, if they have 2 first round draft picks, if they trade Brandon Aiyuk away, let's say to a team in the top 13, okay, well, let's say you have pick 25 and 13. That can get you into the top 10. Like, it really should be able to. So maybe that's an option. Maybe it's, putting picks together and making a package pick or package trade for a kind of high end, bona fide star receiver, which doesn't seem like what this team would do. Deebo Samuel, second round pick. Dante Pettis, second round pick. Brandon Aiyuk traded up for a late first round draft pick. This team has seen plenty of star receivers in their way. Even when Javon Kinlaw was on the board, so was Henry Ruggs, which, yikes. But Jerry Jeudy, who has shown some ability here and there, but has been injured. But more importantly, CeeDee Lamb was there. Go back and listen to this podcast 4 years ago. I was yelling and screaming, saying, "Why did you not pick CeeDee Lamb?" And I think in retrospect, 2020 is always nice to have, right? I was right, but you want to give Javon Kinlaw the benefit of the doubt. But this team, like this Niners team, does not feel like a roster that or an organization that wants to trade up for a high-end receiver. They want to draft a receiver they like and develop them. Now, could that be a top 10 guy? Sure. That seems to be more likely a high second, fourth round guy. Your Danny Grays of the world, your Juwan Jennings, who was a 7th round pick. Even guys, again, like Aiyuk. Aiyuk was not a top 10 pick. He wasn't top 15. He wasn't even top 20. Like, he was like, what, 22, 23, whatever he was. Like, he was inside the 20s. He was not a, high-end pick. And many players or many draft, gurus thought he was a second-round pick. I know the Packers are mad about that because they wanted to draft him and pick Jordan Love instead. But my point more so is that it doesn't feel like the solution to this is trade Brandon Aiyuk away for a first-round pick and get a high-end top of the line receiver. It feels more like if you're trading Brandon Aiyuk away, you're either, filling a hole elsewhere, or you're drafting a kind of a guy who sits for a year and learns, or is playing for a year and kind of finds himself in Shanahan's doghouse where you're having no impact until he explodes in his highest potential in a year, 3 years down the road. That seems more likely to me. The last option you have when it comes to what to do with Aiyuk and Deebo Samuel, and this seems to be the most reasonable option. This seems to be, the more likely option of the 4, maybe outside of extending him, which, again, if you can't do it financially, here's the way to get around that. You start restructuring players, even someone like Deebo Samuel, you add in ghost years. D Ford's taking up $8+ million on this team's current salary cap. This team is not afraid to pay players that are not going to be on this team, as long as it means freeing up cap space to extend star players like Kittle and Warner and Samuel and in this case, potentially Brandon Aiyuk. Like, this team is not afraid to pay guys, top of the line money, high end money to not play for them. If it means getting and keeping guys like CMC and Ayuk and Deebo and Warner and Kittle. So that's an option. Restructuring guys like Chris McCaffrey, which they did this past offseason. Restructuring guys like Warner and even Javon Hargrave and Mooney Ward. And, you know, I'm going to assume guys like Hufanga are going to want to get paid too if they stack another good season on top of their last year in 2022. Dre Greenlaw can get restructured. And there are plenty of players that can get restructured, and vice versa. There are plenty of players they're paying now that could easily be replaced when it comes to 2024. If D Winters is really good, maybe that makes Dre Greenlaw expendable. If, per se, Drake Jackson's really good, they may not have to pay him high money or don't feel the need to go out there and pay for veteran, the Arden Keys and Clellan Farrells of the world. Maybe they go, it's Nick Bosa and Drake Jackson, a two-man army, go get the quarterback. Or they say, George Kittle, you're getting older. Let's figure this thing out. Let's extend you and lower your cap. Like, there are so many options here when it comes to Brandon Aiyuk, and it's really not cut and dry of one or the other. This isn't a Brandon Aiyuk versus Deebo Samuel conversation. This is a San Francisco has 4 or 5 options here they can do, and many of them do include keeping Deebo and Brandon Aiyuk. Now, you can argue all you want of who's better. I think they both do very different things. I think one's a pure receiver, aka Brandon Aiyuk. I think one is a more explosive offensive weapon, aka Deebo Samuel. So it really comes down to your preference. But I think, like, this is what I've always said in many of the podcasts, many of the shows, is that it doesn't matter what I want. It doesn't matter what you want either. It matters what Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch want. Now, maybe John Lynch is doing TV by 2024. We have no idea, but it really comes down to what do they want to do. And I think they have shown over the course of their tenure here, they want to keep their star players, pay the players they've drafted who have succeeded, and in return, reward the players they have been able to trust with the football in high leverage moments. And that's been Brandon Aiyuk at least for 1 year, and has also been Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel was integral in 2019 in that run towards a near victory in the Super Bowl. And he was also integral in 2021 and also 2022. Brandon Aiyuk in 2021 and 2022. Like, they have two guys that have played big time minutes, it's not the NBA, but snaps, and have had many big catches, many big plays and big moments. They want to keep both of these guys. And when the question becomes, can they? The answer is yes. Like, they can keep both of these guys. But I think to flip that, the question really shouldn't be, can they keep them? The question should be, what do they need to do to keep them? And I think that's where things get tricky. Do you have to trade Eric Armstead? Is it worth trading Eric Armstead after this year in 2024 to keep Brandon Aiyuk? Is that worth it for this team? And that may look different once this year's over with. Like, things can change a lot. Like, guys get hurt, guys have bad years, so many things can change. So when you see this conversation of it's Deebo against Aiyuk, it really isn't. What it is does the organization have the means to re-sign both of them? Not right now, but they can. And how does San Francisco make that path clear? It's going to take some work. It's going to take many of restructuring. It's going to take maybe a massive trade. But I think we have seen over time that San Francisco has learned from a lot of their mistakes. Sometimes you have to make a mistake to learn from that. I think Kinlaw, DeForest Buckner being the prime example. I think even right now, I think they are learning a little bit of what the Trey Lance situation has been. Is that a mistake? I don't know, but I do think it is a learning situation for them. It's a learning experience for John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan to say, how can we get better from this? Because we've seen guys like Hufanga, who was a 6th-round pick, grow and learn, and Greenlaw, and Warner, and Kittle. Like, there's too many examples, even Brock Purdy. There's too many examples of low draft picks succeeding on this roster that may make them say, we don't need to sign Brandon Aiyuk. We can just draft the guy in the 5th round and just let him go out there and play wild. Or on the inverse, they can say, there's nobody like Brandon Aiyuk. Like, we have learned that there is nobody out there on the market in the draft class worth what Brandon Aiyuk is worth. To us, we have to resign him. Eric Armstead, goodbye. Or restructure and extend and do certain things to open that path for them. But as of this moment, I think that conversation of Brandon Aiyuk versus Deebo Samuel really shouldn't even be happening. But because it is, and many fans and even podcasters out there are having this conversation, I don't think this conversation is, a 1v1. It really is a conversation of, does San Francisco have the means? Yes. Can they make it happen? Yes. Should they? In my opinion, yes. Will they? We'll find out, but I think it would be in this team's best interest to keep their stars, and I think they would agree. They could have traded Kittle. They could have traded Armstead. They could have traded, Jimmy Garoppolo at a certain point. They could have traded many players they have, and they didn't because they want to pay their stars. They want to pay their high-end players, and I think Brandon Aiyuk, when it's all said and done, some way, somehow, that is going to get done after this season. They're not going to let him play on the 5th-year option. They rarely do that to guys they want to pay. But I will say this. Of all the players that have played on the 5th-year option, I think Brandon Aiyuk is one that they actually do want to wait and see what he can do. They were going to pay Bosa no matter what. It was just a matter of how much. And Defensive Player of the Year makes that a higher price tag. They were always going to try to pay Mike McGlinchey, but found out he was going to price himself out of the market. They said, okay, if Colton McKivitz, we feel comfortable doing so. Like they had prepared themselves to lose him, but said they wanted to get that done. They've always sat back and said, hey, look, like we want to keep our stars. But I do think of guys like Armstead and even Buckner, they wanted to pay him. They just couldn't find the right money and said, let's shift and maneuver. San Francisco is always shifting and maneuvering around. How can we find the right way to win and the quickest way to win? Those things hurt sometimes. Those moves they make hurt sometimes. But I do think that in this case, he is going to find himself in a situation like a Deebo Samuel, like, a Nick Bosa, and say, 5th-year option, go out there, put 2 seasons together. Once you do, that'll be great. But I do think Aiyuk does find him in a situation where I think they want to see him do it again. That wasn't the case for Bosa. That wasn't the case, for guys like Deebo. They knew what they had in Deebo. He just happened to have an insane year in his 4th year of his contract, or 3rd year of his contract, excuse me. But I think they do want to see it again. They know it's there from Aiyuk, but I do think they're kind of waiting to say, can you do this 2 years in a row with this many stars on this team? We know what Kittle is. We know what CMC is. We know what Deebo is. Who is Brandon Aiyuk? We have a good idea, but I think they want to see it again because it reaffirms in your mind, we have to pay you. Like, I don't think they have any problem with Aiyuk having another 1,000-yard year and saying, we'll pay you. You're worth a lot to us. But I do think they want to see that play itself out before just saying, yep, we're going to pay you all the money. If there's a reason Aiyuk is not paid right now, they want to wait and see what he can do. It's smart financially, makes a ton of sense. That being said, I think Aiyuk gets paid. I think Deebo stays. But guess what? We have a whole year. We have a whole year to go. No need to rush. There's 17 games ahead of us. That's not including preseason. That's not including a hopeful playoff run. That's not including even training camp. We have so much time to look at this and dive into it. I'm sure we are going to revisit this conversation in less than a year and say, Brandon Aiyuk shouldn't get paid, or Brandon Aiyuk, pay him right now. That's how this stuff works. But if you want to go to a game or a training camp or a hopeful playoff game, heck, if you want to see Taylor Swift in concert and she's on SeatGeek.com selling tickets, you can use our promo code 49ers Access 49 ERSACCESS at SeatGeek.com. Save yourself $20 off your first purchase. You can also follow us on social media at 49ers.access is the Instagram, 49ers_access is the Twitter. It's on screen now. It'll be in the description as well. And on top of that, if you want to buy some Niners merch and support the show in the meantime, use our Fanatics link above and down below in the description. With all that being said, we are only a handful of weeks away from Niners training camp. I can't wait. I'm hoping to go, but we got to wait just a little longer. But that being said, you have been listening and watching to the 49er Access podcast. And until next time, my name is Sterling Bennett, asking you, telling you, demanding that you like, share, subscribe, leave that review. This has been the 49er Access podcast, and stay faithful.